My husband threw me and my daughter out of the house so he could bring his mistress in. 1 year later, I destroyed his $1 million empire. The sound of trash bags hitting the hardwood floor echoed through the hall like a gunshot in a church. I froze in the doorway, Hannah's tiny 3-year-old fingers gripping the denim of my jeans, as if she could sense her whole world was about to change forever. The black plastic bags scattered across the Italian marble tiles held what was left of 5 years of marriage. Clothes that still carried the faint scent of the perfume I wore to board meetings. Photos from family vacations that now felt like elaborate lies. And the books I had collected during long nights studying market trends while Graham slept soundly beside me. The scene unfolding in front of me felt like something I was watching in a movie, not living myself. In the living room I had designed, Sloane Whitaker sat on the cream Italian leather sofa my husband and I had chosen on a romantic weekend in Milan. 28 years old, the management consultant had a naturally striking beauty. Her platinum blonde hair fell flawlessly over her shoulders, and she wore a designer dress that probably cost more than her monthly salary. She scrolled through her phone with deliberate indifference, glancing up now and then to study her manicure as if the collapse of a family was nothing more than background noise compared to her more important concerns. Graham Hawthorne, my husband of 6 years, Hannah's father, the man whose promising career I sacrificed my own to support in the early startup days, stood near the marble fireplace, arms crossed. His expression was a mix of challenge and quiet satisfaction, like he was finally getting rid of furniture that had outlived its usefulness or discarding a burden he no longer felt obligated to carry. The custom-tailored suit he wore had been paid for with money from the business plan I wrote, the investor presentations I had stayed up all week preparing. "You don't belong here anymore, Amelia," he said, his voice cold in the same way he sounded when firing employees who couldn't meet his increasingly unrealistic expectations. "I've moved on with my life, and it's time you did the same. Pack up whatever's left and get out of my house." The casual cruelty in his words hit me with brutal force. 6 months of mounting suspicion, nights he didn't come home because of urgent client meetings, phone calls that ended abruptly when I walked into the room, mysterious charges on the credit card statements. All of it led to this moment of absolute clarity. But knowing logically that my marriage was over was entirely different from being thrown out like a tenant who'd overstayed her welcome. "Graham," I said, trying to keep my voice steady and rational, even as emotions surged through me like a rising tide. "We need to talk about this like adults. We have a child. We have legal obligations, shared assets, financial responsibilities that can't just be dismissed by—" "The lawyers will handle all those tedious details," he cut in, waving a dismissive hand, the gesture so careless it felt like he was shooing away an annoying insect. "But the outcome isn't really the point. I built this company from nothing. I bought this house with the money I earned. I provide the income that keeps this family afloat. Without me, you and that kid would have nothing. You and the kid would starve on the street." The suffocating cruelty in his tone matched only by how casually he delivered it, as if he were discussing the weather instead of destroying the lives of the people who had loved and supported him. This wasn't the Graham I had fallen for at that Harvard Business School networking event 7 years ago, when he was charming, ambitious, warm, generous, and seemingly committed to building a real partnership. The man standing in front of me now was a completely different person, someone who had let financial success turn him into the kind of man capable of discarding his own family like outdated office equipment that no longer served his goals. Success had exposed the flaws in his character, flaws that had probably always been there, waiting for the right moment to surface and poison everything we built together. My eyes swept around the living room, flooded with memories of countless hours spent there in the early years of our marriage. I remembered working through complex financial projections for Hawthorne Tech, while Hannah slept in the carrier beside me, surrounded by laptops, notebooks, and empty coffee cups as I drafted business documents meant to secure our future. I wrote the grant applications that secured crucial seed funding, prepared the pitch decks that convinced venture capitalists to take a risk on N.A.'s unknown startup, and used my professional network to secure meetings with decision-makers who provided the initial capital for Graham's company. My MBA and extensive experience in corporate finance had played a crucial role in Hawthorne Tech's early success, providing financial expertise and strategic thinking that turned Graham's creative ideas into a viable business model. But now that the company was profitable and his ego had grown, Graham seemed to have forgotten the essential contributions that built the success he was enjoying. "Mommy, what's going on?" Hannah asked, her soft little voice cutting through the tension in the room like a blade through silk. "Why is that lady sitting on our sofa? Why are our things in bags?" I knelt down so I could look her in the eyes, my knees hitting the cold marble, my hand smoothing her jet black hair with fingers that trembled despite my desperate effort to stay calm for her. Her innocent brown eyes, so much like Graham's, stared at me, and I had no idea how to explain what was happening in a way a 3-year-old could understand. "We're going to stay somewhere else for a while, sweetheart," I said, trying to keep my voice steady and reassuring, even though my heart was breaking. "Like a big adventure, just you and me. Can you help Mommy take some of our special things to the car?" As I went around the house gathering the essentials, formula, diapers, a change of clothes for both of us, Hannah's favorite stuffed animals, and the laptop filled with years of my work, Graham watched with clear impatience, as if the act of packing up the remains of our life together was inconveniencing more important plans he had with his mistress. Sloane kept scrolling on her phone, occasionally letting out a soft hum of amusement at whatever she was looking at, completely indifferent to the family chaos happening around her. "Oh, Amelia!" Graham called out as I headed toward the garage with Hannah. "The BMW is registered in my name, so obviously you can't take it. You can use the Honda, but leave the Lexus here." It was yet another calculated insult in a day already full of them, staged to reinforce the new status of his mistress, someone with no stake and no right to claim anything from the life I had helped build. The 7-year-old Honda Civic needed new tires and made a worrying clattering sound when the AC was turned on, but I didn't argue. I had learned long ago how to choose my battles carefully, and right now, my only priority was getting myself and Hannah out of that toxic environment safely. The first night in that extended stay hotel felt like living inside a nightmare. I sat on the edge of the narrow bed watching Hannah sleep. The room smelled overwhelmingly of industrial disinfectant, mixed with the stale disappointment of whoever had stayed there before us. And the walls were so thin I could hear every conversation, every argument, every TV show from the rooms on either side. The fluorescent light buzzed nonstop, casting a harsh glare that made everything look even cheaper and more depressing than it already was. The carpet was stained with marks of unclear origin, and the furniture was old, chosen more for durability than comfort or aesthetics. But instead of surrendering to the despair threatening to swallow me whole, I sat there, reviewing everything, analyzing the situation with the same systematic, strategic approach I'd once used in corporate restructuring projects back when I worked in consulting. I had about $8,000 in personal savings Graham knew nothing about, money I had quietly set aside from freelance consulting projects I'd taken on during our marriage. I had a prestigious business degree from one of the most respected programs in the country, along with 6 years of hands-on experience building a successful tech company from the ground up, even if my contributions had been unofficial and mostly unacknowledged. More importantly, and perhaps most dangerously for Graham's future, I knew the operations, the financial structure, the strategic vulnerabilities, and the competitive weaknesses of Hawthorne Tech inside and out. I understood the company's customer base, knew which contracts were the most fragile, and could pinpoint the operational weak spots Graham's management style had created and sustained over the years. This was knowledge Graham never imagined I would one day be in a position to use against him. Graham moved faster than I expected. In less than 10 days, the divorce papers were delivered by overnight courier to that rundown hotel. He had hired Boston's most expensive attorneys, the same ones who had helped Massachusetts tech billionaires protect every last dividend. The divorce petition granted me primary custody, but also claimed I was fully capable of supporting myself and the child, thanks to my Harvard MBA, meaning no alimony and child support. After his lawyers cleverly shifted almost all his income into company dividends and unexercised stock options, the state formula spat out a pathetic $412 a month, the bare minimum practically an intentional insult. The court moved at lightning speed. Just 45 days after those black trash bags hit the marble floor, the final judgment was stamped. I got custody of Hannah, no shared assets, no share of the company, because my name was never on any of the equity documents, and I signed the decree with a trembling hand while Sloane stood in the hallway of Suffolk Superior Court, taking selfies showing off her new diamond ring. The ring purchased on the exact day the judgment became official. In the weeks that followed, I threw myself into job hunting with the intense focus of someone whose survival, and her child's survival, depended on immediate, measurable success. I updated my resume, carefully highlighting my academic credentials and the consulting work I'd done before marriage, while subtly minimizing the years I'd spent supporting Graham's career at the expense of my own professional development. I began reconnecting systematically with former colleagues who had often wondered why such a promising young professional had seemed to vanish from the fiercely competitive world of corporate finance. The initial responses were far more positive than I expected. Several reputable firms expressed genuine interest in interviewing me, recognizing that the combination of my academic background, early career achievements, and hands-on experience helping build a successful company was precisely the kind of talent they were looking for. My absence from the formal workforce for several years wasn't nearly the obstacle I had feared it would be, especially with strong references from former supervisors, friends, and the competency I could clearly demonstrate. Within just 6 weeks of starting my job search, I received and accepted an offer for a senior analyst position at Blackwood Capital, an investment firm specializing in technology sector investments. The firm held a strong reputation in the industry, and its focus on emerging tech trends aligned perfectly with the expertise I had built during my years helping to grow Hawthorne Tech. The salary was modest compared to what I could have been earning had I not paused my career to support Graham, but it was enough to rent a comfortable apartment in a good neighborhood with strong schools and provide the stability Hannah needed. More importantly, from a strategic standpoint, the role would give me access to market intelligence, industry relationships, and investment opportunities, critical elements for the plan I was beginning to set into motion. Act 5. In the first months at Blackwood Capital, I established myself as one of the firm's sharpest and most reliable analysts. My reports on emerging tech trends circulated widely, not just within the company, but across the broader investment community, and my stock recommendations consistently outperformed market expectations by a significant margin. I worked longer hours than most of my colleagues, partly out of necessity to quickly prove my capability in such a competitive environment, and partly because I genuinely loved the analytical work I had missed during the years I spent as the wife of a tech executive. My colleagues were impressed by my ability to spot market opportunities others overlooked, identify operational weaknesses in seemingly successful companies, and predict industry shifts months before they became obvious to the rest of the market. But the deepest and most focused research I did took place at night, after Hannah was asleep, and our small apartment was quiet, except for the hum of my laptop and the distant sound of traffic. Those were the hours I dedicated to studying Hawthorne Tech, with the precision of a forensic accountant investigating financial fraud, analyzing every public filing the company submitted, reading trade publications on healthcare technology, and tracking Graham's performance as CEO. What I uncovered through this meticulous work was exactly what my professional instincts had warned me about. Graham was absolutely a visionary entrepreneur with real talent for identifying market opportunities, but he was also a mediocre executive whose management style created serious vulnerabilities. Vulnerabilities I had quietly covered for in the past, before they could be spotted by investors. Under his leadership, Hawthorne Tech had grown rapidly in revenue and market share, but that growth came at the cost of operational efficiency, customer satisfaction, and employee retention. The company was taking on increasing levels of debt to finance aggressive expansion while neglecting to improve quality control systems, invest in customer service, or develop employee training programs, the kinds of investments that ensure long-term sustainable growth instead of short-term collapse. The financial statements, buried in technical language and accounting jargon that most investors would never fully understand without deep expertise, revealed deeply troubling trends that painted a very different picture from the optimistic growth story portrayed in press releases and investor presentations. Cash flow was declining despite impressive revenue gains. Customer retention rates were dropping across multiple product lines, and several large contracts worth millions annually were approaching renewal with no guarantee they would be extended under the current terms. Most concerning of all, employee turnover had surged over the past year, especially among senior technical staff who had been with the company since its early days and held critical institutional knowledge of product development, customer relationships, and operational processes. In a labor market already struggling to supply enough software engineers and technical project managers, this kind of sustained talent drain was often the earliest and most reliable indicator of deeper organizational problems that would soon surface as declining product quality, missed deadlines, and customer dissatisfaction. Recognizing all this, I began quietly and systematically buying Hawthorne Tech stock across multiple brokerage accounts, carefully staggering the purchases to avoid triggering SEC disclosure requirements. At first, these were relatively small buys, several $100s here, $1,000 there, funded by my modest savings, my gradually increasing salary as my reputation at Blackwood Capital grew, and the tiny child support payments from a millionaire father. But as my income increased and my understanding of the company's strategic weaknesses deepened, I became more aggressive in my accumulation strategy. I opened accounts at several different brokerage firms, used my maiden name for some of the transactions, and structured my purchases to resemble the routine activity of unrelated retail investors rather than a coordinated effort by someone with intimate knowledge of the company's operational reality. The strategy required enormous patience and financial discipline. There were months when I had to choose between buying more Hawthorne Tech shares and buying new clothes for Hannah, between making a larger stock purchase and taking a vacation that would have helped relieve the constant stress of single motherhood and rebuilding my career. But I kept my focus on the long-term goal, knowing that short-term sacrifices were necessary to achieve financial independence and reclaim justice. By the end of my first year at Blackwood Capital, I had accumulated nearly 75,000 shares of Hawthorne Tech across my various accounts, an investment worth roughly $2.1 million at current market prices, representing about 4.8% of the company's outstanding shares. This made me one of the largest individual shareholders, even though my identity was obscured behind the complex network of brokerage accounts and investment vehicles I had carefully constructed. Meanwhile, my personal life had shifted in ways that were challenging but far more fulfilling than my former life as Graham's wife. Hannah was thriving in her new preschool, making friends and showing remarkable resilience. I built routines that allowed me to excel at work while still being present for the moments that mattered most in her life: bedtime stories, playground adventures, and the countless small conversations that shape a child's understanding of the world. I was genuinely happier than I had been in the last years of my marriage to Graham. The constant strain of living with his increasingly erratic behavior, growing narcissism, and habitual cruelty toward anyone he considered beneath him had been replaced with the quiet satisfaction of building something entirely my own. I felt profoundly liberated, making decisions rooted in my values and priorities, instead of continually adapting to my husband's shifting moods and his unreasonable, self-serving expectations. The crisis I had been patiently waiting for arrived right on schedule, if anything, earlier than expected. Hawthorne Tech's largest client, a restaurant chain accounting for nearly 35% of the company's annual revenue, announced they were immediately terminating their multi-million-dollar contract due to ongoing software failures, inadequate customer support, and repeated delays in critical system updates that left their operations vulnerable to security breaches and regulatory violations. The announcement sent shockwaves through the tech sector and triggered an immediate crisis of confidence among Hawthorne Tech's other major clients. Several of them quietly began exploring alternative vendors for their technology needs. The company's stock price plunged 47% in a single trading day, wiping out more than $200 million in shareholder value and creating exactly the kind of destabilizing environment I had prepared meticulously to take advantage of. Within hours of the announcement, financial news outlets were publishing articles about Hawthorne Tech's leadership crisis and operational failures, while analysts openly questioned whether the company could survive the loss of such a crucial revenue source. These pieces quoted anonymous employees describing a toxic work culture, unrealistic deadlines, and a leadership team more focused on personal perks and office politics than on delivering quality products to clients. I read these articles with a genuine sense of sadness. I took no pleasure in seeing a company I had helped build struggle with problems that could have been avoided with competent management and realistic operational planning. But Graham's failures had created an opportunity, one that would allow me to step in and potentially save both the company and the jobs of hundreds of employees who didn't deserve to suffer because of their CEO's incompetence. The morning after the stock collapse, I requested a meeting with the managing partner of Blackwood Capital to discuss a complex, structured investment opportunity that I believed could generate significant returns while also serving critical strategic objectives. I had spent the entire night preparing a comprehensive proposal, one that not only demonstrated the financial potential of the investment, but also reflected my deep understanding of the operational challenges and competitive position of the target company. My proposal was this: Blackwood would provide Hawthorne Tech with an emergency $45 million financing package in exchange for convertible preferred shares, which could be converted into common stock at a substantial discount to the pre-crisis market price. This would give the company enough capital to survive the immediate crisis while positioning Blackwood as a major stakeholder with significant influence over future strategic decisions. For me personally, the conversion terms would give me effective control of roughly 28% of Hawthorne Tech's outstanding shares, making me the largest individual shareholder in the company and giving me the power to push for major changes in management and operations. The board meeting where Blackwood's proposal was formally presented took place in Hawthorne Tech's glass-walled conference room on the 32nd floor of a luxury high-rise in downtown Boston. The room overlooked a stunning view of the harbor and the city skyline, but the atmosphere inside was thick with the desperation that comes with the looming threat of corporate failure. Graham sat at the head of the mahogany conference table, with Sloan, recently promoted to Chief Operating Officer, despite having no relevant experience beyond her relationship with the CEO, beside him, along with several board members who had supported his increasingly questionable leadership decisions over the years, as operational problems mounted. His usual polished appearance had begun to crack. His expensive suit was wrinkled, his hair needed trimming, and the dark circles under his eyes made it clear he hadn't slept well since the crisis began. When I walked into the conference room as Blackwood Capital's lead representative, holding a leather portfolio containing the financing proposal that could determine the company's fate, Graham's expression was unmistakable and full of shock. His jaw dropped, and his hand gripped the edge of the table so tightly that his knuckles turned white. It was obvious he had never imagined he would see the ex-wife he discarded reappear in a professional setting, let alone as the person presenting a financial proposal that could dictate the future of his company. "What the hell is she doing here?" Graham demanded, his voice rising in pitch as he struggled to maintain composure. He looked around the table in panic, as if my presence were some elaborate prank he expected someone to reveal at any moment. "This is a clear conflict of interest. She can't be involved in this company's business decisions." "Mrs. Bennett is here on behalf of Blackwood Capital, one of the most reputable investment firms in the region," replied Alexander Park, the chairman of the board, a veteran venture capitalist who had been one of Hawthorne Tech's earliest investors and who had watched Graham's leadership deteriorate in recent months. They've submitted a very compelling proposal for emergency funding that could save this company from bankruptcy. I opened the presentation with the confidence, calm, and professionalism I had honed over years working in the high-risk world of investment analysis. I had prepared for this moment with meticulous attention to every detail, not just rehearsing the financial aspects of the proposal, but also anticipating the complex emotional dynamics of facing Graham before a board of directors while maintaining absolute composure. Hawthorne Tech is currently facing a liquidity crisis that directly threatens the company's ability to continue operations. I began, my voice steady and authoritative as I presented the first slide of my comprehensive analysis. Without an immediate capital infusion of at least $15 million, the company will be unable to meet payroll obligations within 45 days, and bankruptcy will be unavoidable. I systematically presented the evidence I had gathered after months of careful research. Deteriorating cash reserves concealed by creative accounting practices, escalating customer complaints that had been ignored by management, the rapid departure of talented employees who had lost faith in the company's leadership, and the cascade of contract cancellations that would inevitably follow if Hawthorne Tech's reputation for reliability continued to crumble. I had documentation showing that customer satisfaction scores had declined for 6 consecutive quarters. Turnover among key technical personnel was approaching nearly 40% annually, and the company's debt-to-equity ratio had reached dangerous levels, breaching several loan covenants with existing lenders. But my presentation was not merely a diagnosis of the company's failures. I offered a full turnaround strategy that demonstrated my deep understanding of both the tech sector and effective organizational management. I outlined a detailed customer retention program to address the service quality issues driving contract cancellations, along with a carefully structured cost reduction plan that eliminated wasteful spending while preserving investment in research and development. These necessary changes will require new leadership, I concluded, looking directly at Graham with a steady, professional gaze that made it clear I felt no fear and no hesitation in the face of his hostility. The company needs leadership that prioritizes operational excellence over personal ego, customer satisfaction over short-term financial optics, and sustainable growth strategies over elevating personal relationships into executive positions. The conference room fell silent as the board absorbed the full weight of the presentation. They were seasoned business leaders with decades of experience evaluating corporate turnarounds, and they recognized that I wasn't simply offering capital to patch a temporary cash flow issue. I was offering genuine competence and strategic vision to counterbalance the inadequacy and short-sightedness of the person currently in charge. Graham's reaction was exactly what I expected. He accused me of orchestrating the company's problems through an elaborate conspiracy fueled by personal resentment from our divorce. He claimed my financial analysis was biased and unreliable because of our failed marriage, and insisted the board reject any proposal that might give his vindictive ex-wife influence over the company he had built from nothing. But his arguments sounded hollow and unconvincing in the face of the company's obvious failures and the mountain of evidence I had presented. And his inability to maintain professional composure during a critical business meeting only reinforced my central argument that he was unfit for executive leadership. While I delivered my case with professionalism, calm, and comprehensive data, he responded with outbursts and conspiracy theories that embarrassed everyone in the room. The formal vote took place after nearly 3 hours of discussion and debate. The result was closer than I had hoped, but decisive enough to avoid potential legal challenges from disgruntled shareholders. 8 out of 12 board members ultimately voted to accept Blackwood's financing proposal, with the clear understanding that significant management changes would be an unnegotiable condition of the investment. Graham was immediately removed as chief executive officer, although he retained his seat on the board and the title of chief technology officer, roles that allowed him to focus on product development and innovation while being completely excluded from operational decision-making and strategic planning. It was a face-saving compromise, acknowledging his genuine talents while also recognizing his profound limitations as a corporate leader. Sloane Whitaker was terminated outright, her total lack of relevant qualifications making her continued employment indefensible once Graham's protective influence was stripped away. The decision was unanimous and immediate, with several board members openly expressing disbelief that someone so clearly unqualified had ever been placed in a senior executive role at a tech company generating hundreds of millions of dollars annually. An experienced interim CEO was brought in from outside the organization to manage day-to-day operations during the transition, but everyone understood that I, as the largest individual shareholder and the architect of the turnaround strategy, would have significant influence over every major strategic decision moving forward. As the meeting ended and the board members began filing out of the room, many stopped to shake my hand and congratulate me on an exceptional presentation. Graham remained seated at the conference table, staring out the floor-to-ceiling windows toward the Boston skyline with the stunned expression of a man struggling to process a failure he never believed possible. "You think you've won something here?" he said quietly once the room had emptied, his voice barely above a whisper. "This was never about winning or losing, Graham," I replied, carefully gathering my presentation materials and placing them in my leather case. "This was about building something sustainable and valuable, something that actually benefits customers, employees, and shareholders. You were given every opportunity to create a company like that, but instead, you chose to indulge your ego." Graham slammed his hand against the mahogany table, his face drained of color. "You're just a single mother living off the $412 a month in child support I generously pay. A woman a court ruled contributed nothing to this company. Who the hell are you to stand here and tell me how to run it?" I waited for the echo of his words to fade through the room, then calmly tapped to reveal the final slide. The screen displayed a single line of text, $412 a month for 1 year. I received $4,944 USD in total, left untouched together with my salary. 198,400 shares of Hawthorne Tech purchased in the past year. I looked directly at Graham, my voice flat and steady, devoid of any emotion. "Mr. Hawthorne, that's not exactly true. I never had to live off your $412 a month. The truth is, that was the worst investment you ever made. It bought Hannah a few extra boxes of formula, and you just lost your entire company because of your own stinginess." I paused at the doorway of the conference room, turning back to face the man who once called me useless and believed I'd starve without his financial support. "I want you to understand something important. I didn't destroy this company out of spite or revenge. The collapse was entirely the result of your incompetence, your arrogance, and your complete inability to understand what real leadership requires. I'm simply here to rebuild it into something better than what you created." Stepping into the lobby of Hawthorne Tech's headquarters, I felt a swirl of conflicting emotions. Deep satisfaction at proving Graham wrong about my abilities and proving I was far stronger, smarter, and more resilient than he ever imagined. But also a genuine sadness for the relationship we once had, for the family broken by his choices, and for the years of my life wasted supporting a man who never deserved the sacrifice. That night, after Hannah had fallen asleep, I poured myself a glass of wine, the deep red liquid shimmering under the warm light of our small apartment. The soft clink of the glass against the wooden table sounding like a quiet whisper of comfort. A reminder that these simple gestures now belonged entirely to me. I stepped out onto the balcony, the cool Boston night air brushing against my skin, carrying with it the faint salt of the distant harbor, and I sat down on the worn wicker chair I had bought with my own first paycheck, not with someone else's stingy generosity. Just a year ago, I had been an abandoned wife with no income, no prospects, and no clear path forward. Black trash bags scattered across marble floors like symbols of collapse. Graham's cruel words still echoing, "Without me, You and the kid would starve on the street. Now, I was the controlling shareholder of a multi-million-dollar company, financially independent. I had proven to myself, to my daughter, and to anyone who witnessed my transformation that dignity cannot be stripped away by another person's cruelty, that failures are temporary for those determined and intelligent enough to rise above them, and that the most satisfying form of vindication is not revenge, but the quiet, steady rebuilding of something better than what was destroyed. Relief, anticipation, and a quiet satisfaction washed through me as I remembered everything I had endured. The long nights in that cheap hotel with the buzzing fluorescent light mocking me. The months of quietly saving every dollar from that miserly $412 child support, turning it into shares that accumulated like seeds planted in dark soil, only to bloom into power Graham once believed was untouchable. I took a sip of wine, the sweet bitterness spreading across my tongue, and felt that freedom like the unbound night wind, no longer weighed down by the shadows of betrayal or fear of tomorrow, but standing in an open expanse where I could breathe deeply, sign my own decisions, and hold Hannah without the old threats lurking behind us. This apartment, smaller than the marble house we left behind, was now a place of real peace. Hannah's steady breathing drifting from her bedroom like the rhythm of a new beginning. The financial analysis books lying open on the table like invitations to dreams no one could steal from me again. And me. I was no longer the victim of cruelty, but the architect of my own fate, with a heart healed and lighter than it had ever been. Outside, the city lights stretched toward the horizon like a constellation of possibilities, glittering reminders that no matter how long the darkness lasts, it only serves as the backdrop for the stars to shine. And in the quiet repetition of tonight, remembering, accepting, letting go, I found true healing, a peace born not from victory, but from knowing I was finally free, finally stronger than every pain that once tried to consume me.